Spoiled.
Well, it was our money, but still,
Now we're all paying for it.
Yep.
for a long time. Long time.
Good evening, and welcome to the October 3rd, 2024 meeting of the Tyngsborough Capital Asset Management Committee. I'm Ron Schneider. I'm the chair of this meeting. The following meeting is being recorded and broadcast by Tyngsborough Media. The meeting is available through our local cable access channel on Comcast and Verizon Fios, and is a live stream on our website, www.tyngsboroughma.gov. A recording of this meeting will be available through the video on demand portion of our website. Open meeting laws require that any member of the audience who intends on recording either audio or video so declare that now. Seeing none, I will start with introductions to my left.
Good evening, Eric Eldridge from the Select Board.
Earl Mason from the Finance Committee.
Good evening, Catherine Foster, Assistant Town Manager.
Wes Russell, Fire Chief,
Very good, thank you.
not on the committee.
A guest.
But if you're looking for members, I'm happy to join.
That's good, yes, okay. Item number 1, I guess, which is number 3 on our agenda, is the FY 26 through 30 capital plan process. Do we want to start discussing that?
Sure. What I'll do now is just sort of cover the process. Last year was the first year where the town manager vetted the projects before coming to capital asset for approval. Similar this year, we'll be doing that. I can pull up here, I've created a manual that I'm happy to make available to the public that will be sent out to department heads. Just to go through it real quick, talks about the capital budget process, members, talks about different types of funding sources, evaluation guidelines that are distributed, even though, again, these are vetted by the town manager based off of funding and priority.
Mm-hmm.
And then just briefly looking at the calendar here, so this will be sent out to department heads on October 28th, and from there they have about a month to send us or submit the projects. And then we'll kick off discussing funding options on November 20th with this committee. So a little bit more streamlined process again. Again, throughout this year, we'll have ample opportunity for the committee to ask any questions, have department heads come in if necessary, but the goal is to really have the town manager and myself sit down and sort of vet those and provide our recommendations and a plan.
Are the numbers that are in there now from last year's plan? So that's when I see 26 through 29, is that, those are from last year?
Yes.
So then you go through the update, constantly updating in this year's plan?
Yes, and the goal this year is to really stick to a 5-year plan. In the past, we've just been, having departments go through this process of submitting projects for the next 5 years. However, we really just isolate in the first year, and that's our priority. We don't really look and plan ahead. So it's Colin and my priority this year to really create and stick to what's realistic, we're looking at our borrowing capacity over the next few years, and get direction, of course, from the finance committee and this committee too. So I wanted to include this as a reference to remind everyone this is the goal, is to create a 5-year plan. This is what we have right now. Obviously, we're looking at, here we're looking at the column of FY26. This is not going to be realistic, but moving forward, it will smoothed out and look more realistic for us.
Yep.
And that's really all I have. Just want to introduce it and love any input on this manual
So this
before
is
we
one
send
you
it
used
out.
last year, and you're just refining it this year? Is that what you're doing?
I actually created it this year.
This is the first time?
This first
year.
So
Okay.
kind of, I guess, takes everything we usually send out to departments and creates one document.
Got it.
That's iterative. So hopefully over the next few years, we'll constantly update that. And my goal is to keep this live, and any feedback that you want to give is helpful, so.
Questions?
Yeah, so, one, I like the manual. I think it's great. I like the formality of it. We struggled with that before. Now that we're adding more of that, I think it's great. One of the things that we might want to take a look at is whether, like all the grading and stuff like that, that we sort of used in the past that we may not leverage now, the grading might not be as important, and, you know, if you could shrink it by not necessarily including those, but what areas the committee thought were important, I think those are still valid. You know, the whole grading process might be a bunch of pages in there that the department heads are like, yeah, whatever. Just tell me what you think is important, and I think if we include that, that would be good. The other thing is, this is expenditures. I think we also talked about how we deal with the funding. So on the other side, between the select board and finance and really town meeting, we want to smooth things out. You're never going to make it completely smooth, and that's where I think we have to figure out, how are we going to be funding the capital stabilization account so that when we have some of these spikes, because we've got some high-ticket items in there, we need to smooth out the borrowing impact of those. So I think we need to figure out, I would think it would be included in this manual to say, here's how we want to approach that, to start to build up some of the capital stabilization, and then maintain it such that when these things invariably happen, we're not borrowing a ton in one year and having it skew some of the longer-term plans that we're looking at as far as debt management.
Does the planning process get down to where you're picking by months or quarter? I need something in fiscal '26 in the first quarter, or is it just say, I need it in fiscal '26, and doesn't matter when?
We haven't gotten down that granular level,
Okay.
but I'm sure there's some flexibility. More often than not, I'll say that departments, if we approve an expense for a fiscal year, you're buying it, you're looking right away.
Right.
Because it could be one of those larger purchases where it does take 12 months. I mean, you can speak to that, Chief, a little bit more, but for the most part, I mean, with ARPA, I'll say that after town meeting, departments spent it
Go.
like that.
Okay.
Here, we'll have to wait for the new fiscal year, but
Yep.
yeah, they try to spend it right away, which is helpful, to know where we are, yeah.
Definitely haven't gotten down to the quarter level. It's one of those ones where it's like, I know I need it this year, you approve it. I mean, we have some dump trucks, I think, if you go through some of the items, we approved them 2-3 years ago that we still haven't received. So
Okay.
some things have a longer lead time than others, and you have to, ultimately, town meeting approves it.
Yep.
Typically, they would approve it for the upcoming fiscal year. There may be emergency situations, like we'll be talking today, where, you knew it was coming, but it's gonna hit us in the current fiscal year.
Yep.
So, I just look at it by saying, even on a year-to-year basis, if you look at what we did before ARPA, the borrowing was very, you do
Spiky, yeah.
2.5 million, then you do 500,000 the next year, because, you're sitting there, but we really, from thinking about what your debt management is gonna be, you ideally are gonna be looking at it by saying, we can incur X amount of debt per year and have it go on an ongoing basis. Well, how do you deal with those years where there's more? That's where the stabilization account.
That's what I was wondering for the year. If I'm at the end of the fiscal year, can I bump it to the next fiscal year? That was where my thought process was going, from smoothing out. Hey, I need that 200,000 item. Okay, it's getting to the end of fiscal year. I can bump it to the next fiscal, but that was what I was thinking from the smoothing point of view.
So you can't, once it's been allocated to a particular capital item, if it's not expended, it goes back in to the general fund and needs to be reappropriated by town meeting.
Okay.
It's fine.
Not by fiscal year, though.
Not by fiscal year. At the end of the year, if you don't use it for that item or whatever, it still stays there, but let's say, and we have some, I think, where we appropriated 100,000. It only cost 80.
Yep.
There's 20,000 that's sitting in there. Over the last couple of years, we've actually gone back and we now recouped all those and reallocated, we had town meeting reallocate those to future capital projects.
It would be an article that would say like rescind prior borrowing.
Okay.
You would see that on a town meeting. I don't know if we've done that recently, but, because we've been using ARPA. But,
Yeah, there would be, but it's one of those things, it doesn't sit in a bucket where we can then say, kick it to next year and, chief will say, oh, I can use it for this.
Something else, right?
Yeah, town meeting says, you're spending it for this.
unless
And
it's
rarely
very-
people come back and say, sorry, I don't really need it, even though it was approved, they're never gonna come back and say, I don't need it.
I don't know, our departments have been pretty good.
Pretty good?
We were approved $600,000 for the 2020 engine, we spent $537.
Okay.
Yeah, and it comes back. I think that
Yeah.
there's been a bunch of, our departments, for the most part, and maybe this is something, Kat, that you can help for our next meeting or another meeting, is to understand what the departments have gone back both from an operating and a capital, because they do that, and I think it'd be interesting to see what the departments, because I know our departments are fiscally responsible.
Good.
With some of those things, and it's helpful. So maybe we could get some of that historically, just to show people and say, hey, you allocated
Just
this
because you
money.
didn't spend it, just because they gave it to you, yeah.
They don't spend it.
Sometime in the past, it was, when I first became chief, I can remember, probably that first year, maybe 18 months into it, I was talking about needing to buy radios and, not sure if it was gonna be within my budget or not. And the accountant at the time said, well, you have a capital approval from 2 years ago and there's still money in it, and it was for radios. I said, I can buy radios with that? And she said, that's the only thing you can buy with that. I said, well, I need radios, so.
Okay.
So it was there, and I didn't even know it, actually, because of the changeover at the time.
That's a good example.
So I had no other questions in the process. I like the process much better than I did, 3 years ago when I started on the committee. It's much more manageable and makes more sense to me.
And like I say, it's iterative. We'll continue to refine it, improve it, streamline it, whatever it. Okay. So the big item tonight is talking about the capital request for the fire department. And Chief, do you want to start us off in that?
Unless
discussion?
Kat does.
Unless Kat does, either one.
If that's okay, I'll just introduce it and then I'll
Yep.
turn it over to Chief, who'll be able to provide some way more context than I can. All right, so we put this memo together, the town manager and myself. So essentially, the fire department is looking to expedite the request for a new fire pumper apparatus to this fall town meeting. As the committee may recall, the pumper replacement has been on the 5-year plan for some time now. And over the last few years, we've dealt with issues which we've been able to temporarily resolve to keep it on the road until the replacement was possible. We sort of had discussions that we, knew that something could happen. We talked about, an engine going, and we talked about funding for that. So this is probably not a surprise that we're here today. Unfortunately, and more recently, the truck is barely holding on with the internal electronics failing, among other issues, the lights, the sirens. So this is a very time-sensitive request. The department is looking for the committee to approve and recommend up to $900,000 for the purchase of the new pumper. The department has 3 quotes, which we included in the packet, and identified 2 demo trucks that are currently available for purchase as soon as 30 days. For this reason, we believe that the expedite request is warranted. The department felt that because they are aware of the significant issues with the truck now and cannot guarantee it will continue to operate until the spring, that they had the responsibility to bring this to the attention of the voters and hopefully expedite the request. We were looking to finance this request, and fortunately just had a AA plus bond rating confirmed, with making this more advantageous to borrow at this time if we so need to. We'll be issuing a short-term ban this fall, and then likely issue the long-term debt in the spring after town meeting approves the remainder of the capital plan. And we'd also like to take advantage of the low interest rates that we're currently seeing on municipal bonds. So this evening, before you, this is the recommendation of the town manager, myself, and the fire department, that we would like you to recommend to the select board that we place the additional article in the town meeting warrant to appropriate and borrow up to $900,000 for the purchase of the new fire pumper. And that, turn it over to you, Chief, if there's anything I didn't cover.
Well, I can certainly give you some historical context, and, you know, I've been part of this process since 2016 now, so I know it pretty well. But this is a 2,000-year engine, and our apparatus, first of all, we have a long-term vehicle replacement plan that we have been using to guide us, and obviously, you know, planning is great, but you make adjustments along the way depending on, you know, how well the vehicle's doing and what you need. But for the most part, you know, for, I would say 20 years anyway, if not longer, the plan in town has been replacing engines when they get to be about 20 years old. That's been the lifespan that has worked in this community. Some standards organizations, compliance organizations recommend placing them earlier than that, but in a smaller town, the usage is less, and we can justify, I think, extending it to 20 years. Problem we ran into was we also had a 2006 engine that basically was in, you know, spending a lot of repair money, always needing something repaired. It was, one of the challenges was getting a demo unit is they come with a lot of bells and whistles because they show them at shows, and they come with mileage. And maybe that was part of the problem, you know, maybe it was the way we used it, but we had no other choice in 2000 to replace the 2006 engine and not the, I'm sorry, in 2020, we had no other choice but to replace the 2006 engine and try to keep the 2000 engine in service longer, because it was, you know, the other one just wasn't gonna keep running. So we were kind of behind the 8 ball. We knew that, you know, we'd just try to nurse this one along for a few more years and see what happened. So we've had this on the capital plan for replacement since 2020 for 2023. And it's, you know, gets kicked back, you know, for other priorities, which some of them are our priorities and some of them are the town's priorities, which is understandable. And last year, the town manager's office, and you gentlemen, I'm sure, as well, wanted to avoid any borrowing, and came to me and said, listen, you know, I had a couple of lower ticket items already on the plan for this coming fiscal year. They said, why don't we fill your 2025 items with ARPA, and we'll put this one off till next year. And I agreed to that. Seemed reasonable. It was, you know, we weren't having too many maintenance issues at the time. Since that time, that's changed, and the big thing is the electrical system started having problems. And at first, it was just the lights, the emergency warning lights were not working consistently. They would go off, and I felt, you know, we'll stick it in an outlying station. We'll say don't use the emergency lights. We'll just drive it to a fire and use it as a pumper at a fire if we need to. Just with traffic, you know, it'll be the last one there, so we won't worry about the emergency lights. We'll keep it in service till next year when we can get it replaced. Then we had to start, the electrical started to affect the ability to put it into pump. And so now we had bigger issues. We had the technicians come in, and essentially what they found was more than one problem with the wiring, but there is a main, it's a pretty heavy, it looked like maybe a 10-gauge cable or something, but that runs along the length of the apparatus, and in different places it had problems with it just deteriorating. Really? Well, it's 24 years old.
Yeah.
You know, and cracking and breaking. There's evidence of probably rodents of some type, whether it's chipmunks or mice that have, you know, gotten into the Lakeview Ave station and, you know, have probably done some damage as well. All this in the undercarriage part of where the wiring goes. So we spent some significant money getting it to the point where it's operational. Then at the time, I sat with Colin and said, I think we're probably putting this truck out of service. But they were able to get it operating again, and we're they're still using it. But, you know, the electrician he basically described it as being like the spinal cord of the
Yeah, yeah.
engine and electrical system, and, you know, there's more problems to come down the road.
So it's working now, but.
It's currently working. It's
yeah.
currently working. It's, you know, there's not, you know, we would not be surprised if it stopped working at any point. And it's 24 years old. So I don't think it's a maintenance issue as much as it's just, you know, it's given us some good years.
Yep.
It's one of 3 engines. When I took over, we had 6 engines on the department. And I've reduced some of the dead wood in the fleet to try and save on our maintenance budget, and not that was necessarily wrong. Our department's evolved quite a bit in the last, 6 or 8 years with the way we staff and stuff, so we probably don't, we probably need those extra engines less than we did then, but at any rate, we've done what we can to reduce the fleet, reduce the maintenance costs. I think this is just an issue that snuck up on us before we were, we almost made it. It snuck up on us before we were ready. Part of the issue as well is that this engine was custom-made so that it would fit in the Lakeview Ave station. That's the other problem is these pumpers that we're showing you won't fit over there. The plan would be to put the 2020 engine over in Lakeview Ave and put the new engine in Station 1. We're gonna have problems with, fitting apparatus. And we've known that this is a problem again for 10 or more years. It's just, we haven't had the money to address it, we being the town. But that's another issue that has to be addressed is being able to do something so we can fit modern apparatus into that station, which I think is otherwise, a sustainable building for us, with some improvements, but.
Yep.
So that's kind of how we got where we are. Like I said, we have a long-term vehicle replacement plan, and this one we just put out a few years, and it caught up to us.
Questions, comments? for the chief?
Sure. You want me to start?
Please.
So, one, yeah, it didn't catch up on you, it caught up on all of us, because we knew this was coming,
Right.
right? We certainly didn't want to have it happen now, but it is what it is, and, I think we need to address it. So, there are 3 quotes that are there. Each, they range in like from 680,000 to like 820 or 830. Tell me about the 3 quotes that we have.
Sure.
Which one is desirable and what your interpretation is of that?
Well, we weren't really shopping for a specific vehicle. When we got the quotes, we wanted to get a ballpark, so we knew, what range we would need. Those vehicles that are ready may not even be available by the time town meeting comes around. So that's part of the concern is, last year when we were planning to submit for the engine for the 2024 capital, or the 2025 capital, I should say, we were seeing quotes of $950,000 at the time, and that's, obviously played into putting it off. It does seem that they're coming down. I didn't look at them closely enough to see which one of those 3 would be most desirable. What we're looking for is an engine that is gonna be designed for, fire attack purposes with the hose bed situated there, and they're all pretty similar. They all kind of meet that requirement with probably a 1,250 or 1,500 gallon minute pump, which is what standard that we get, and at least a 750 gallon tank. Some of them have 1,000 gallon tanks. That's essentially what we're looking for, and, we'll take the best deal we can get that kind of meets those parameters. So I can't speak to the specific quotes, but that was just to give you an idea as to what these engines are costing now. It seems like they've actually come down compared to 18 months ago or something like that, so that's good, but.
It seems like the Spartan one's available now, if I read that letter in the back, an
Right.
email, that,
And there could be another fire department that's looking at that right now too and trying to get funding, and so we may get one of these. We may have we have some other ones where the dealer has said, we're expecting this chassis in February. So if you want us to reserve it, let us know. Or some, they may be ordering one that they're gonna get, in the spring sometime. We may have to take advantage of that. And I guess the urgency, if you will, is if we ordered one, if we did what the routine process is to put out a spec and, have it built for you. And that process used to take certainly less than a year. Now it's more than 18 months, maybe 2 years, for various reasons that we've all experienced in supply chain issues and that kind of thing, and employment rates. But, so if we had to end up ordering one, that's a long process. If we can take advantage of either a demo or a chassis that's on order, that then we can say, okay, well, this is how we want it kind of fixed up when you get it, and have some flexibility there, which may be our best option. At least knowing that we have the funding, we can say, yeah, we're gonna take that, reserve it for us when it comes in. And certainly we don't end up paying for these until we receive it. So that would be months down the road, probably into the next fiscal year, but if that were the case. If we go for the demo,
What's the miles on a demo? So I'm probably,
so the two that I saw had 5,000 and 7,000 miles each.
is that pretty nothing, or is that pretty low?
We don't put a lot of miles on, we put a lot of hours
Hours,
on, so
yeah.
that's more, specifically, if we were gonna buy it, we'd be looking at that as
Hours,
well. To
okay.
see, cause they travel a mile or two and then run
Yep,
where they're sitting, and they're diesel engines, that's what they're designed to do, but.
yep,
Yeah, most of those miles on the demos are highway miles. They're not really getting beat on driving through the city or something, so that's probably not a big deal, but.
and what's your current fleet? You have, did I hear you say 3?
We have 3 engines. We have a ladder that also has a pump and tank that is a small tank.
Yep,
And we have our tank truck, which is a 3,000 gallon tank truck that also has a good sized pump on it. And those are, as Eric knows, those have been on the plan for replacement as well.
okay.
The ladder truck is 27 years old, and the tank truck is now 30 years old this year. And actually, I was, anticipating this meeting. We were looking at our long-term vehicle replacement plan, and we had previously placed a priority on the ladder, but and we've been trying to get the tank truck on a grant for 4 years now, but we're gonna put the tank truck as a higher priority. We had to put some repairs into it just recently, so it's that's something that we're gonna be looking for, within the next couple of years as well, unfortunately. But we certainly get a life out of them,
Yep.
Yep.
And the tank truck is obviously critically important, because we have so much of the area of the town that doesn't have hydrants or has less than adequate hydrants, and, it becomes a critical piece of equipment.
Is looking at a used an option at all? Have you looked at it? I mean, there's a market out there. I mean, I don't know anything. I just played around and looked a little bit out there. You
Yeah.
talked about low miles and hours, and I get that, but is that something, I'm just thinking availability more than,
Sure, certainly on an emergency basis, that would be certainly probably a good option to look at. I guess I would have to understand how the procurement process works for a used. I know that we could do that. Certainly, we wouldn't plan on getting 20 years out of a used one.
right?
Depending on where it came from and what kind of, if we're gonna use from a place like a city like Lowell or Nashua or Fitchburg or something,
Yeah.
it's probably been used very well,
Yeah. I mean, it's funny, I couldn't find
we-
that, it's funny, like a 2016 with 25,000 miles, does that sound reasonable, or is that crazy?
Yeah, it depends on,
Hours, probably back to the hours.
25,000 miles probably means it's got a lot of hours on
right,
it.
back to the hours.
Because these aren't traveling long distances.
Okay,
But, we did that, we had purchased a used ambulance as a backup, and it had been used in Provincetown on the Cape, and they never drove it all the way to a hospital. They would drive it to the scene and then meet the private ambulance who would drive all the way into so
Okay.
it was in great shape,
Okay.
and we still use it as a backup today. So I just don't understand the procurement process of that, and I'm not, I don't think that's our best option, but.
We also don't have a warranty on it in that case.
Yeah.
Is
Right,
the other issue.
right.
yep,
So if you had a preference, is the a demo versus ordering a chassis, you know, the chassis that's available, is there a preference one or the other?
The preference would be if, like, you know, if there was, you know, someone who said, we have a chassis coming in the next few months, that then we could, you know, determine, okay, well, we want the hose bed set up this way, we want, you know, this many discharges on this side, this many on that side, or we,
Yeah.
you know, we don't need, you know, the demos have, again, lots of bells and whistles, like, you know, that demo that we had a neat thing where the ladder rack, where you have ground ladders that mount on the side of the truck, would had a motor that would lift them up onto the top of the truck out of the way. Pretty neat, but when that motor wasn't working, it was a real pain in the butt to try and get those ladders off, you know?
Yeah.
Things like that. So my preference, and I don't make decisions alone, we would get our leadership team together and look at options, but I think my preference would be to be able to take a chassis that someone plans on getting in the next few months and using that, but if,
Is time critical, though, if you had to wait 9
Yeah,
months or 12
so-
months
so-
versus 30, 60, 90 days? Is that your balance you're trying to?
yeah, what I'm trying not to do is wait another year.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, I'm hoping we can get a few more months out of this engine. You know, all those variables I feel like we're kind of juggling. But, you know, my preference, I think, would be a chassis that we can then make some decisions on, but we may not have the luxury of doing that, yeah.
Yeah.
And procedurally, so, you know, why 900,000? I mean, so the net on it is, it goes to town meeting, and you can spend up to. The challenge that you're running into is if we sit there and say, okay, let's do 825 and we'll work a deal, and if you got something at 830,
Can't do
you
it.
can't do it.
Right,
So.
Right.
So my understanding is the reason why we're looking at the 900 is, yeah, all you did was, we had to find some quotes enough to get in the ballpark. You add enough of a buffer so that when it goes to town meeting, but that doesn't mean that you're gonna spend up to the 900. It's, you work with Colin and Kat to say, let's follow state procurement laws, let's figure out what we really need. And as we've talked about before, spending the money, you know, frugally and appropriately, and sitting there saying, hey, we're gonna be responsible in how we do it. But we can't be in a situation where we've got a time constraint, and now we've gotta go back to town meeting again in the spring, and you've
For another
lost.
$5,000 or something.
Yeah.
Well, is the 9 meant to cover building expansion
So-
as well, or?
Well, I was gonna say, I mean, that is
that
something
a-
that we've talked about, and, you know, that, you know, we believe that for, you know, a lot less money than what, you know, building a whole building, that we could put a garage, like a steel frame garage on the side of the Lakeview Ave station. And, because the problem is both height, width, and length there.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
And
Yeah.
all around, and it, you know, if anybody goes there and checks out, you can see where the bricks are missing in the front of the station, where we've backed into things, but
Yeah.
would be to, you know, make like a steel garage on the side to be able to fit a modern engine in as well. Hopefully with this funding as well.
Well, let me ask a question on that, because we'd
And I
have
don't
to
know how
see,
that
we'd have
works,
to see how
how it
the
has to be
warrant.
worded for that.
Yeah, we'd have to see how the warrant would have to be, the warrant article would have to be worded in order to get that. Let me ask you a question. The current machine has some salvage value to it. Are we gonna?
Maybe, yeah.
We're gonna surplus it, right? I'm assuming we're gonna,
When we got rid of some apparatus, you know, a couple of years ago, that, the one that we decided we just had to replace, we couldn't, you know, and the other ones were kind of like backup reserve pieces that we had sold off. We had people buy all of them except for that one that we had just recently taken out of service, nobody wanted it. It was, and I don't know, you know, I'm not a mechanic, but
a fire pumper with
we're get-
electrical problems isn't
I'm
gonna go
here-
for big
Yeah, I'm here
bucks?
telling you that we're not sure it's gonna keep running, so I'm not sure how much value it has, salvage value it has.
Well,
you
and it's
know.
a 2,000, right? 2,000 year.
Yeah.
It was a good year.
There's collectors that get into these, but it's, you know, it's nothing fancy, it's, you know,
Yeah.
I was just, I'm thinking we
some
would,
people like to have fire trucks, I don't know why, but.
yeah, I was thinking that we'd probably be better off saying, let's deal with the pumper and whatever that is, and then deal with, okay, storage, because you still have to evaluate. You don't even know what you're gonna get for a machine and how it's gonna fit. Sit there and say, okay, we know, let's set expectations that we know we're gonna have some expenditure coming in Springtown meeting for that same thing, but we figure all that stuff out once we determine what machine is coming in and what your space needs are. That's what I would recommend, just, I also think it makes it, we all know that the more complex a warrant article is, the more likely people are gonna find a problem with it. And, you know, when I look at this, none of us wants to be here dealing with the pumper. It happens. And what I don't want is us being in a situation where there's a fire.
Yep.
And the sirens don't work, or God forbid, the pumper doesn't work, or whatever. That's not acceptable. We can't do that. And I look at it and say, every time, you know, I don't like the price, I sit there and go, I don't like paying taxes, I don't like the numbers of it, but we can't not do it. I think
That
we have
risk
to-
is
we have to
imminent.
do
Sounds
it.
like that risk is here right now, right? That could happen tomorrow, right? We could be, so.
Right.
So I look at it and say, I don't know how we can not
Yep.
do it, and how we can not at least put it to, you know, it has to go to town meeting, so
Exactly.
ultimately the town
Yep.
will decide.
Yep.
But I personally think that we as a committee should
And-
advocate strongly
If
for
I could
it.
just add, this was, from my understanding, last year, part of the plan for this year, in the spring. We're just basically saying, you know, we may not make it to spring.
It's been there, yes, this was going to be something that we talked about this. This has been on the plan for the last several years.
Well, is that the number in the 26 budget? I just saw in 26
We
a
knew,
900
we knew it
number?
was coming.
Okay.
We knew it was coming, and it was one of those ones, I think, when you get through some of these, you sit there and say, what's our budget? Oh, we can't borrow anything? All right, here's what we have in free cash, here's what we got. With this one, I don't, you know, personally, and I'll make a motion that we recommend to the select board to put on the warrant article the up to $900,000 for the pumper truck as proposed, for fall town meeting, special town meeting.
Well, do you want to second that?
I will second that.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion on that? I agree with you 100%, by the way, and I've had this discussion with Kat and Colin previously, and came to the exact same conclusion, that we would be remiss not letting the town make that decision. We just can't hold off. It's a safety issue. It's not a nice to have, it's a we have to have, right, so. All
It
right.
sounds like still speed is the issue here, not waiting 12 or
I
18
mean,
months, so, you know,
yeah,
I don't think
like
we
you
have
say,
the
it's-
time, listening to the condition there,
How much
right?
risk do we want to take on?
We don't want to take it, I don't
Right.
think we want to take it, there's safety involved. So,
Yep.
so when I saw that Spartan quote and said we can deliver in 30 days, like, okay. Now you probably have sales tax and delivery charges and all that, that probably get all rolled into that number, I'm sure, as well.
Fortunately, we don't
No
have to pay
sales
tax.
tax.
Okay, no tax, no, none of that.
But that's what
Yeah.
Cat and Colin.
And we'll have to
They'll-
figure out the procurement process, if it's,
Yeah,
you know, state bid list price, or
Right.
get some kind of a buying group, you know, because we have to either go out to, you know, bid, or get quotes, or go through a group that's already done that for us, or a procurement process, so.
So does the process work? It goes to town meeting, gets approved, and then you get the green light, then you just go, then you're starting, and you guys are working the phones, and working your quotes, and really going from there, okay. Okay.
So,
that's,
we vote?
we, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, abstained, that carries 3-0-0.
Thank you.
You didn't let me read the motion. Well, you,
I already made the
I know,
motion.
okay, fine, you're that efficient. Next meeting date,
November 20th.
November 20th. All right, that will
I
be
move to
after,
adjourn.
Second.
we are adjourned. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
I'll leave this with you just in case.
That's great.
I'll have
Thank you.
more questions